Hi everyone, my name is Maddie and welcome back to another Telequarium with the Alaska Sea Life Center. I am going to introduce a very special guest for you all today who is going to be teaching our Telequarium. His name is Nico, he lives in Oregon, and he is a bit of a fossil expert. So he's going to be teaching us about ocean fossils today. Thank you so much for tuning in to our Telequarium. We can't wait to see you in the future, and I'm going to hand it off to Nico.
Hello folks, welcome to the Alaska Sea Life Center YouTube channel. My name is Nico Spadafora, and I'm actually filming this video for you guys from Rhododendron, Oregon. And we're going to talk about some fossils that come from the ocean, millions of years ago. And I'm very excited to talk about it because fossils are kind of my thing, if you can tell by all the dinosaur stuff behind me. So, a lot of these fossils you're going to see today are actually very, very common fossils that you can go out and find. And a lot of rock shops also sell these fossils as well, and they're fairly cheap if you get the smaller ones. They can get bigger, and obviously they're going to get more expensive, but the cool thing is all of these are really, really common. Some of you might even have these already, which is the coolest thing about this. So maybe you don't know what they are, and if you don't, I'm here to help. So let's get started. The first fossil I want to talk about is this animal called a nautiloid. I'm going to show you it right here. So this guy right here. These fossils are all over the place. This specific species that I have is the one you're going to see the most. It's called an Orthoceras. They really just get about that big. That's kind of the general size you see them, right? And they're really cool because they're related, if you can't tell by the name, they're related to a species of animal today called the nautilus. And the nautilus is that spiral shell, squid-looking thing that swims backwards and its little tentacles poke out of that little slit in its shell, right? These guys were relatively similar. The only difference is obviously those shells aren't very conical, right? Or not conical, that's what they are. They are conical. They're actually not spiral like the nautilus is today, right? They're shaped like that ice cream cone shape, the conical shape. And they were all over the place and they got huge. But this species, like I said, really just about that size. They lived around the Ordovician period, which was about 470 to 458 million years ago. Very, very long time ago. That's well before the dinosaurs were even around. So, I'm sorry, my eye keeps getting itchy. So, very, very cool. And one of the misconceptions I want to talk about is an animal that kind of looks like a nautilus, that is a very common fossil as well, that actually isn't very closely related to either of them. You might recognize the fossil right here. This is an ammonite. Very, very cool fossil. The ammonite actually is more closely related to squids and octopus and cuttlefish, which is really, really cool. And they came around in the Devonian age, right? And lasted all the way to the end of the Cretaceous period, which is when the dinosaurs died out. So to give you kind of a time frame, right, that's about 409 to 66 million years ago. So they were actually around after species like the Orthoceras died out. So very, very cool. Another really cool thing about these guys is how they got their name. They're called the Ammonites, right? And they got their name from an Egyptian god called Ammon. And he's often depicted wearing ram's horns. And if you look, they kind of look like a ram's horn that's really, really tightly wound, right? And so Ammonite translates to horns of Ammon. Awesome stuff. So let's move on to another very, very common fossil you're going to find a lot. And you might also have one of these as well. This, I've got a bigger one right here. This is called a Trilobite. The Trilobites are very, very cool, and they lasted a really long time as well. They were actually around in the Cambrian period, so before the Orthoceras and the Ammonites came around. The Trilobites came around in the Cambrian period and lasted all the way to the Permian. The Permian was probably the biggest extinction event around, and we'll get into that in a second. But Trilobites are actually related to things like spiders and scorpions. They're kind of arthropod, and their name means three lobes, Trilobite, right? Very, very cool. They were all over the ocean. They didn't really swim around. They were more like a spider or a scorpion. They crawled along the ground, right? And well, I guess it would be the seafloor, not the ground. So these guys were really, really cool. And they died out at the end of the Permian, which was about 252 million years ago. But they were around 521 to 252 million years ago. So, the Permian extinction was probably, we don't talk about it a lot, mainly because it's not as charismatic as the Cretaceous extinction, the KT boundary, right? So the Cretaceous extinction is the time that the dinosaurs died out and the mammals took over, right? That one, it took about three-fourths of all life on Earth died out. Anything above 55 pounds was basically out of here, right? Anything smaller was able to survive. And that is due to the fact that the meteor impact started all of that. The Permian extinction, however, was a lot different. They died out from the splitting of Pangea. And it was about 90 to 95% of sea life went extinct. So things like the trilobites went extinct, and a lot of other sea life went extinct. And one of the animals we're going to talk about here in a second was severely impacted, but luckily is still around today. And they're kind of delicious, if you know what I'm talking about. So, very, very cool. And it was about 70% of land life died out during the Permian extinction. So a lot more animals died out from the Permian extinction than the Cretaceous extinction. But the Cretaceous extinction is obviously when the dinosaurs went extinct, so, we like to talk about that more because they're a bit cooler, right? The next fossil we're going to talk about is actually called a Brachiopods. I'm going to show you the one that I got right here. It's kind of small. It's kind of dark, so hopefully you guys can see it. All right, so here we go. Oh yeah, you guys can see that. I'm looking at it right now. That's a brachiopod, and brachiopods are still alive today. All over the place. We're talking about mussels and clams, right? Those are all the brachiopods, and there's a lot of other species of brachiopods. They came around about during the Cambrian period, so like when the trilobites came around that we just talked about. The brachiopods, though, are still alive today. And one of my favorite things about brachiopods is what their name means. They literally translate to arm foot. Brachiopod. So I like that a lot. Brachiopods are really cool. And I think one of the funnest things to learn about these guys is that there's over 12,000 different fossil species of brachiopods recognized. So they're all over the place. You can find them all over the place, and they're still alive today. They beat the odds, and they're still around, and we like to eat them now, right? So let's move on from brachiopods, and let's get into some bigger things that you guys might not know about very much. So, probably one of the most famous sea life, right now at least, that we like to talk about is something called a mosasaur. It was in Jurassic World, right, and all those movies, and though that one was a little exaggerated, they're still very, very cool and very, very similar to the ones in the movies. So I'm going to show you, I have a tooth of a mosasaur. This isn't the Mosasaurus tooth, so here it is. I'll show you how big it is next to my head. It's a decently sized tooth. The mosasaurs, this specific species is called Prognathodon. And Prognathodon was a big example of the mosasaurs. Their teeth, if you can see, I should take this one out of the rock a little bit more when I get a chance, but they're very, very conical as well, which means that their teeth weren't really meant for slicing things. They were a lot like crocodile teeth. They were meant for grabbing and holding on to things. And when the mosasaurs would bite onto something, they'd probably grab and shake, right? They'd shake their things around to tear it apart just like a crocodile. But mosasaurs are often considered dinosaurs. But I want to stress, I can't stress enough that they're not. It's just like the pterosaurs, like the pterodactyls and pteranodons. Those are not dinosaurs. They're their own things. They're marine reptiles and pterosaurs. Mosasaurs, marine reptiles, and there's a lot of different species of marine reptiles. You've got the plesiosaurs, like the Loch Ness Monster, right? Plesiosaurs. You've got plesiosaurs, which are related to the plesiosaurs, but they look a lot like, they kind of look like a mixture between a plesiosaurus and a mosasaurus. Very cool. They've got actually some of the biggest predators around are the plesiosaurs. There's a very famous one called Predator X that was discovered in Norway. We'll show you a picture of it here. It's called Plesiosaurus, right? So, we've got the plesiosaurs, we've got the plesiosaurs, we've got the mosasaurs, and we've got the really famous ichthyosaurs that kind of look like dolphin lizards, but they're marine reptiles, right? Very, very cool stuff. A lot of marine reptile species are out there. And if you guys get the chance after this video, I highly suggest looking them up because they came in all sorts of shapes and sizes, and they were all very, very cool and awesome. Like we all know Plesiosaurus, right? So the Mosasaurus, prognathodon, means four-jaw tooth. And it was discovered in 1889. It lived around 83 to 66 million years ago, so it died out with the dinosaurs, right? It was part of the sea life that died out during the KT boundary. And most species, there's actually a lot of species of prognathodon, like different genuses of prognathodon. And most of them got about 5 to 10 meters long, which is about 16, so about 5 meters long is generally how big they got, so about 16 feet. But the bigger ones got to about 10 meters long, which is about 32 feet long, which is pretty big. A little smaller than T-Rex. T-Rex got about 42 feet long. So yeah, very, very cool. Died out 66 million years ago with the dinosaurs. And finally, there's one more fossil I want to talk to you guys about. Well, two actually, but it counts as one, because we're going to talk about them together. And it's this guy right here. This is a small example of one. This is a Megalodon tooth. And yes, this is a very, very small one. They got bigger. They got about as big, if not bigger, than my hand, right? Megalodon is obviously one of the largest sharks that has ever lived, if not the largest shark that lived. And one thing that I recently learned about Megalodon is that there was actually more than one species of Megalodon. There was actually about 69 species of Megalodon. Not all of them had the name Megalodon in their name, but they were all pretty much Megalodon with like minute differences that made them different species. 69 species of Megalodon. All of them giant sharks. Like, to give you an idea, the general size of a Megalodon, like the average size, was about 39 feet, about 10 and a half meters. But the largest ones, all of these are estimates I should add, is about 18 meters, which got up to 59 feet long. So to give you an idea, like since this is all generalized, like the idea, like the fossils we find of Megalodon, and most sharks for that matter, are all fragmentary. We're only really getting the jaws. Because with all sharks, their bodies are made up of cartilage, and cartilage does not, it really doesn't fossilize as well. And so the bone structure in the jaws, though, because the jaws are where all the power are, do fossilize, and we have giant Megalodon jaw bones that we can kind of guesstimate looking at sharks that are alive today and figure out how big these guys got. Looking at Megalodon jaws, we kind of figure out that they are pretty similar to like a great white shark or a basking shark or even a sand tiger shark, right? It's kind of what they looked like. The more general looking at them was more like a great white shark, but like think of a great white shark and make it 4 times bigger. Then you have a Megalodon. They're very cool, and one of the reasons we think they went extinct was actually to, one was, you know, climate change and the lowering of the sea levels during the Ice Age. They really liked their warmer waters, and things got colder during the Ice Age, obviously, because of the name. And we think that they kind of died out by that. But another thing we think about is that they probably died out due to competition with a very, very cool species of animal called, see, I had to write it down because it's a long name, the macroraptorial sperm whales. So, super predator sperm whales that were actually hunting other whales, and possibly even Megalodon, competing with and even hunting Megalodon. Think of like a killer whale, an orca, that could possibly hunt a great white shark. We've seen it happen very rarely, and it's possible that these whales were also hunting the Megalodon if the Megalodon wasn't also hunting them. Probably, you know, butting heads a lot. And a really famous species I like to talk about is the species called the Leviathan. It's literally a giant sperm whale. Very, very cool. And so the Megalodon lasted around 23 to 3 million years ago. They were actually fairly close, and there's a lot of people that still think Megalodon might be alive today, hiding deep in like the Marianas Trench, right? But they were a warm water shark. They really like their warm waters, and so I mean, me personally, I kind of doubt it. So, very, very cool stuff. Megalodon, I should add, is actually its second name. Its full name is Carcharodon megalodon. It means big tooth, which obviously with a tooth that's bigger than, if not as big as my hand, that makes sense for a shark. The tooth I held up for you, this megalodon tooth, is probably about the size of a great white shark tooth. So imagine this, right? And the tooth is probably got about that much bigger, right? Like, we're talking like that wide and that tall. So this is a very small tooth for a megalodon. So, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you guys learned something, maybe even identified some of the fossils you guys had. Once again, my name is Nico, and thanks for listening to me talk.
Thank you everyone for watching, and I want to give a huge thank you to Nico. That was amazing. I learned so much, and I hope you all did too. But once again, thank you for tuning in to our Telequarium at the Alaska Sea Life Center. We hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and we hope to see you soon.